Hey everybody, Jonathan Broadbent here, and welcome to another episode of UnWoke.Academy. Today is the day after Thanksgiving 2023. I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving with friends and family. If you are watching this from overseas and you are one of our wonderful servicemen or women, welcome and thank you for your service. Greatly appreciated. My name is Jonathan Broadbent, and I bring to you conversations about fighting back against the woke left in finance. Believe me when I say that the globalist woke left have their tentacles deep into the world of finance. In fact, they kind of constitute the lion's share of where all the woke-a-doodle nasty stuff comes from. It is at its core financial and power driven. I'm going to actually talk briefly today about something that I refer to as weaponized regulators. And to put that into context, bear with me a second here. I want to talk a little bit about some of the experiences that I've had outside of the world of finance, but also fighting back against other kind of facets of the woke-a-doodle left. So you may not know this, but in addition to my professional role working in finance, which I've done for several decades now, I am involved in a number of different organizations and in leadership capacities here and there. One of them, years ago, I kind of drew short straw in my community, in this group of friends, and became the president of a group that works on self-defense. And that, as you might imagine, involves all facets of the ways that one might defend oneself, including many things that the left find abhorrent. The notion that we're going to learn and understand how to protect our communities and defend ourselves is horrifying to many on the left. I have still not figured out, and I don't understand why. But in addition to that, I am a chair and territory lead of something called Protect Ohio Children. And through that, I've gotten to be friends with a number of different organizations, Parents Defending Education and Protect Child Health Coalition, and all those sorts of things. And so I was one of those early defenders of children and was fighting all the woke stuff that came in, trying to force children to be masked, which makes no sense at all. I actually took the time to inform myself on the medical reviews and reports, all of which, all of any meaningful report anywhere prior to 2019, globally and especially in the United States, government, military, or otherwise, indicated that masks made no sense at all to slow or stop the spread of viral infection. And so I viewed them as just simply a warped and manipulative tool to damage and harm children. And that's bearing out. It's emotionally scarring and harmful and damaging. Things like isolation, being removed from societal norms, being separated from parents, masking, it just had massive detrimental effect. I saw it coming and I understood that, and so I fought back. The idea of mandating experimental shots into children, I find abhorrent. And so I started fighting back years ago. And as you can imagine, all of that stuff and many of the other things that I do, just advocating for America and community and Judeo-Christian values, capitalism, which is something we can actually define and understand in the world of finance, those aren't loved by the left. So I am the subject of something that I refer to as weaponized regulators. And here's what that looks like. Starting in, well, I'm gonna start with an overview, just really quickly, and we'll dive back into UnWoke and where this takes us. But in March of 2020, the most amazing thing happened. The chances, 1 in a trillion, probably. So I am in a group of friends that fight and advocate for such things. We try to bring actual education into K through 12, not woke indoctrination or racial division, racism, enforced pornography. That's just the vile nonsense that's showed up after COVID. None of us like that stuff. So there are a bunch of us that fight back. And predating my role at UnWoke and coming out publicly against the ESG, CBDC, the woke left things in the world of finance, prior to that, I was very visible in the fight against the woke left globalist cabal in education. So it was on people's radar. And that included a bunch of really pretty interesting things, like national media brought a film crew and mic'd me up and followed me around and interviewed me and all kinds of stuff, which kind of really then propelled me onto this national stage of one of those people who is advocating for fundamental Judeo-Christian Western values and those kinds of things. So in this group of friends, I've got a very good friend who's a child psychologist of 36 years. It's important to make note of the fact that in 36 years, she's never had a complaint or blemish on her record. And of course, as in the psychology profession, she has a review board, psychological review board, whatever they're called. Another friend, very similar stance on issues and very vocal publicly, fighting back against the masking of children. I've got another friend who is a lawyer, or was. And so in March of 2023, last year, March of 2023, there are three of us in 1 month all got letters from our respective agencies, our three-letter agencies, the governmental regulators that allow, I'm air quoting that, they allow us to be in business. And the letters were read virtually identical. They were nearly identical from three different regulators that, the other two, that was claimed that they had complaints filed against them. For my part, there's no complaint, but there was a heightened examination, I think they called it, or some sort of, it was like my typical examination, which I've gone through lots of through the years. Those examinations are usually 2 days. If there are some things to follow up or documents that need to be changed or new verbiage included somewhere, it might be a week. I'm now coming up on, I'm not far away from 2 years of this heightened examination. So the lawyer faced being disbarred, and that happened. The lawyers rescinded his bar license, or whatever you call it. The woman, after 36 years in psychology, has relinquished her license and now practices outside of that medical review board environment. And the construction company ran the risk of losing access to bidding on government contract types of work if they didn't kind of change some things. And it's nasty. It's really nasty stuff. So by way of example, we are far from alone. This is what you call, we've seen the weaponization of the Department of Justice. And you saw specifically our Attorney General, what was it, 2 years ago now, referred to people who go to school board meetings as domestic terrorists. And that's still, by the way, it hasn't disappeared. That memo is still out there. It has not been rescinded. And so, and FBI agents have just swarmed en masse to chase around after people who support the non-woke-a-doodle left. So it's weaponization across the board. And as a result of this, there's actually a few good things that have come out of it. I've had many back and forth elements of examination of my company. I had a bunch of letters. So it was like, it looks like this. And here's another sort of a measure of comparison. I never remember her name. I've got a mind block. The woman in Texas who started True the Vote years ago, there's a documentary on what she went through to open that facility. It was going to start looking at our elections systems and processes. And it was just like wave after wave. The building and site review inspectors would come in and say that her building wasn't up to code, and then the fire marshal would come in, and then I don't remember the exact specifics. I'm paraphrasing hypotheticals, but then like once that was done, then the IRS would come in and they would want to audit the books, and all of this was before she was even allowed to open and start her business. And that's kind of the environment, but now it's a lot more. I mean, back then that seemed like exceptional. It's really rare. Weaponized IRS and agencies like it. But now it's all of us. If you're not woke-a-doodle far left, that's my term for it, by the way. I call them woke-a-doodles. So here's the thing that I think is kind of crazy and really interesting is this thing that's happening with the who is it? It's the mayor of New York City, who came out. I mean, just like far left Democrat, and he's been sort of this darling of the Democrat Party. But he questioned the border policies and immigration and the illegal immigrants being flooded into New York City. And since then, poof, lo and behold, suddenly he's being examined by all these different agencies, and they're looking back at something that I think he's accused of something from 30 years ago. And all of a sudden, isn't it interesting? All these things show up for this person. So the left, they don't care. They don't care how left somebody is. They don't care. As soon as you deviate at all from the prescribed narrative, you're under the bus. And so for me, that happened some years ago when I started doing all that stuff. UnWoke, that's, as you can imagine, that's certainly, absolutely not something that the left enjoy. So now it's rampant and awful. I can't even begin to describe. I'm to the point now where I'm just numb to it. I get another wave of like a 6-page letter. They've gone back 10 years through my books and records. They've asked for things they've never asked for before. They've asked for layers, deep detail. But here's the cool thing. A few cool things, when life gives you lemons, or a giant truckload of lemon, you make lemonade. And that's what I'm doing, making lemonade out of the lemons of weaponized regulators. And one of the things that came out of that is these regulators came to me last year, and they wanted unbelievable, ridiculous detail about the clients who I serve. They wanted to know their home address, their email account, their phone number, their I think I said physical address. They wanted to know where all the monies are held and what platforms and what sort of trading activity. It's called a blotter in my world, for things I wasn't even directly involved with managing. And so I said no. I said they're allowed to have as much information as they want about me and my company. And a whole bunch of times, just to prove a point, drive a point home, I actually offered to give regulators access to my bank accounts in view-only privileges. So, and I can do that. I can let them view all of the financial transactions forever. I don't care. They can look at whatever they want, and they'll see who's the payments are coming from, and they can see the canceled checks, if people mail me checks, those kinds of things. Like, you can look at my company all day long because I'm under your regulatory authority, but you can't go through me to ask me to spy on and release private confidential information about individuals associated with companies that I serve. That's ridiculous. So we went back and forth, and they showed me I'm sorry, I'm going into the weeds a little bit, but this is just a sign of the craziness of the left and how power hungry and abusive they are. So they sent me this document that actually pertains to a line of code that gives them authorization to dig deep and ask virtually anything they want of me if I am suspected of wrongdoing. And I said, okay, well, good. We have some clarity there. What wrongdoing am I expected? Are you considering me of, or what are you investigating? What am I suspected of that you are digging that deep. And they came back in writing, in a letter, in an email, and said, "Oh, you're not suspected of anything. You haven't done anything wrong, and there are no accusations of wrongdoing." I said, "Well, okay. Well, how is it that you can point to a line of code of law, regulatory law, that allows you to do a deeper examination under the suspicion of wrongdoing, but you're telling me that I haven't done wrongdoing?" So to me, that tells me that door is closed. Oh boy, did they not like that. They don't like informed people. Um, the other good thing that's come of it, and more to the point, is as I've shaped conversation around encouraging people to understand what woke is and where it exists in the world of finance and how to get your money out of the stuff. Don't feed the enemy. Um, it's like chumming the water with sharks. They will circle and they just want more and then more, and they're just voracious. They will eat anything and everything. This globalist cabal, and they already have like trillions of dollars of our money. Why we should not be giving money to people that clearly hate American values, our rights, liberties, and principles. They despise communism, and yet we're funneling money into these far left companies and causes. We should not be doing that. So, as I've been talking about how to understand and kind of peel the onion, and we've been doing deep dives into things like mutual funds, and we've kind of picked apart some things like 401k plans and how they work, and some specific 401k plans. I'm looking at you, Procter and Gamble. We started with a big expose on Procter and Gamble when I went and spoke near Cincinnati, Ohio one time. But we should be doing that, all of us, collaboratively on all this stuff. Think of your wallet and the world of finance like we now do schools and politicians. We used to just assume it was hands off. Your money goes to some big ivory tower, and they have massive Wall Street buildings, and they look pretty. And your stockbroker, advisor, planner, whatever you call them, that person seems really nice, and they have 6 Mercedes and 9 mansions and a private jet, and so therefore things are probably good. That's been the mentality so far. Well, as people have woken up to the woke in things like pharmaceutical influence on healthcare, and are starting to take their own health into their own hands and eat more healthy and pay attention to all the pills they're subscribed. And as we've been made aware of the left influence in academics and education, and are starting to pull our kids out of government-run schools and find better alternatives to actually properly educate children. And as we've found these horrible tentacles of woke, don't lose sight of wallet. So here's where I'm headed with that. As we've talked about where we find it, I've been giving the last 2 intensive years to study and examination of where the good is, because it's clearly not enough to tell people. And we started with BlackRock. It was a big expose on BlackRock on August 4th of 2022, went out on a bunch of different social media platforms. And since it was a few months later, BlackRock actually they kind of started blowing up all over headlines. And we've been talking about it ever since. It's not enough to say, don't go to BlackRock and Vanguard, stop giving them your money. By the way, that's step 1. Do stop giving your money to BlackRock and Vanguard, and all those other companies that we've been exposing as terrible and treacherous, directly or indirectly. Side note on that, diss the left. I keep saying it, that's our mantra. Know where you donate, invest, and spend. Diss the left. Stop spending your money at places like that. Stop investing your money at places like that. Stop donating money to far left woke-a-doodle companies and causes, because they're hurting us. They're hurting the United States, Europe, Western values all over the world. They have far too much money and far too much power. But Where do we go from there? That's where it gets really exciting. And that is making the lemonade out of the lemons that came from weaponized regulators. So we're looking now at building private funding for all sorts of small local community enterprise. At the same time, banks are closing. You've got community banks closing all over the place because the regulatory environment is just crushing small banks and forcing all banking into, I think ideally they'll probably, if they had their way, the globalist big money cabal, we would have probably 4 banks in the United States, and they would probably be global, and that was it. Those are your 4 choices. And then behind those 4 choices, there's really probably only like one big family that controls all 4. That's kind of how things work in communism. And people who want money and power, they love communism. Look at all the places where communism exists. You get like a couple of families and this little circle of people that are all basically trillionaires, and nobody else owns or has anything. So that's what they are kind of headed toward. But when we look at building private funding and use that as an alternative investment rather than go into the BlackRocks and Vanguards of the world, create something that is capital and funds local business enterprise. That's what we're building. That's the exciting thing that comes out of the lemons of 2 years of weaponized regulators. I'm Jonathan Broadbent. Thanks for listening. This has been another episode of UnWoke.Academy. Stay tuned for the next episode.